Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time. Not to the battlefield of a berserker, but into the creaking hull of a Viking merchant ship. A gnar, heavy with trade goods. You're huddled on a long, hard bench, the scent of damp wood and dried fish filling the air. The rhythmic slap of waves against the planks a constant lullaby. Overhead, the square sail, a patchwork of woven wool, strains against the wind, its shadow dancing in the twilight. It's cold, you're probably a little seasick, and the only light comes from the distant, bobbing lanterns of your small convoy. You're not here for glory or conquest, but for the quiet, grinding work of making a living, hoping the gods and the sea smile upon your enterprise. This journey is less about raiding and more about haggling, less about axes and more about silver scales. You probably won't survive this journey unscathed, if you make it back at all, but tonight, we'll imagine you do. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a long way from home. The familiar fjords of Norway or the open plains of Denmark are behind you. Receding into memory, you're part of a small, organized group, a merchant crew bound together by kinship and a shared thirst for profit. The world you inhabit is vast and, frankly, a little terrifying. It's a time before borders were solid lines on a map, when a river could be both a highway and a gauntlet of hostile forces. Your path isn't one of glory, but of patience. The Viking Age, from the late 8th to the mid-11th centuries, isn't just about the raiding parties that get all the press. In fact, a mainstream historical fact is that the majority of Viking activities were focused on trade, exploration, and settlement. The raiders were just the loud minority, the dramatic outliers who sold a good story. You, my friend, are one of the quiet ones. Your world is connected by a network of waterways and land paths. From Scandinavia, your people sailed west to the British Isles, Iceland, and even across the vast Atlantic to Vinland, what we now call North America. But for a merchant like you, the real money is often found closer to home and to the south. You're part of a dynamic, interconnected economic system that stretches from the frozen north to the bustling markets of Byzantium and the sophisticated cities of the Islamic Caliphate. Think of it this way: your home is a small village nestled by a fjord. The wealth of your community isn't measured in gold coins, but in practical things: good woolen cloth, strong timber, dried fish, and perhaps a few domesticated animals. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that your wealth might also be measured in a good crop of barley for brewing beer. Because what's life without a decent ale? The economy is based on what you have and what others lack. You have access to valuable northern resources, like furs from the deep forests, amber from the Baltic shores, and the precious tusks of walruses, the ivory of the north. But getting those goods to market is an incredible logistical challenge. Your journey is fraught with risks. You're not just a merchant, you're also a sailor, a diplomat, and a fighter. You have to be, because the world is not a friendly place. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' initial raids were a primary goal or simply a way to secure resources and routes for later trade. Were they raiders who became merchants? Or merchants who used raiding to clear a path? It's a chicken and egg situation that keeps scholars up at night. But for you, the lines are a little blurry. You'll do what you must to protect your cargo and your crew. But for now, you're just a speck on the sea, the wind in your sail, and a belly full of ambition. You're not a fearsome warrior. You're a businessman, and tonight, we'll see if your gamble pays off. The cold spray of the sea hits your face, a constant reminder of the ocean's power. You shiver a little, pulling your wool cloak tighter. Your focus, however, is not on the weather, but on the hold below your feet. That's where the real story lies. The reason for this perilous journey. The cargo you carry is a testament to the diverse and often surprising economy of your world. It's a blend of high-value luxuries and mundane necessities, each with its own story and destination. The biggest part of your hold is filled with mundane goods, things that would seem almost boring to a modern eye. You have salted fish, a staple food and a reliable commodity, packed tightly in wooden barrels. You have bales of wool, sheared from your own flocks, and woven into sturdy cloth by the women back home. These are the workhorse products. The things that will always find a buyer and provide the foundation of your profit. But then there are the exotic goods. The things that make this journey truly worthwhile. Tucked away, carefully wrapped and protected, are the tusks of walruses. You had to journey far north to acquire these. Maybe trading with the indigenous people of the Arctic. These are not just teeth, they're the ivory of the north. A precious material that will be carved into intricate game pieces, jewelry, and religious artifacts in the sophisticated workshops of the Frankish kingdom or even Constantinople. A mainstream historical fact is that walrus ivory was a major export from Viking settlements in Greenland and the far north. Highly sought after throughout Europe, its value was immense, a direct competitor to the ivory from African elephants. Nearby, you might have sacks of amber, collected from the shores of the Baltic Sea, glistening like frozen honey. The demand for amber is strong. It's believed to have medicinal properties and is crafted into beautiful beads and pendants. You're also carrying honey, not just for your own consumption, but as a trade good. It's a sweetener, a preservative, and a key ingredient for making mead. Its value is high in places where beekeeping is less common. And then there's the truly unusual stuff. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that your hold might contain live falcons. These birds were prized by the European aristocracy for hunting, and a well-trained falcon could fetch a handsome price. Far more than a sack of grain. Imagine trying to keep a dozen grumpy falcons happy and healthy on a rocking ship for weeks. It's a logistical nightmare, and probably why there's a constant, low-level squawking coming from a specially constructed cage. It's a real pain, but the potential profit is worth the headache. You also have a significant amount of furs, fox, sable, and ermine pelts, carefully dried and stacked. These are a status symbol and a practical necessity for keeping warm in the colder parts of Europe. Historians still argue whether the demand for these furs was the primary driver for Viking expansion into the far reaches of Russia, where they established key trade networks with the local Slavic and Finnic peoples. It's a classic case of supply and demand shaping history. Did they go east for the furs? Or did they find the furs and then realize their value? The diversity of your cargo speaks volumes about the Viking world. It's a world where you can trade a salted fish for a piece of silver, and a walrus tusk for enough cloth to outfit a small village. You are a crucial link in this chain. A walking, sailing warehouse of goods that connects disparate cultures and economies. You know the value of each item, the best place to sell it, and the right person to sell it to. The goods in your hold are more than just items. They're a narrative of your travels, your risks, and your potential rewards. The fate of your entire family, and maybe even your village, rests on your ability to bring these goods to market safely and profitably. The wind is picking up, and the Nar groans under the strain. But you feel a different kind of pressure, the weight of your responsibility. The storm has passed, and the sun is finally breaking through the clouds. A welcome sight after the last few days. You're on deck, checking the lines and making sure the sail is set just right. As you lean against the rail, you run your hand along the smooth, curved timber of the ship's side. This vessel isn't just a boat, it's your livelihood, your home on the water, and your most valuable tool. It's a Nar, a marvel of Viking shipbuilding specifically designed for commerce. Unlike the longships used for raiding, the Nar is a dedicated freighter. It's wider, deeper, and has a much higher freeboard. That's the distance between the water and the deck. This gives it a greater capacity for cargo, a crucial feature for a merchant like you. A mainstream historical fact is that the Nar's design prioritized stability and cargo space over speed and maneuverability, making it the perfect vessel for long-distance trading voyages. The construction of this ship was a major undertaking for your community. You remember the sound of axes ringing in the forest as the shipwrights selected the perfect oak trees. The keel, the spine of the ship, had to be a single, solid piece of timber. Then came the clinker-built hull, where the planks overlap like scales on a fish and are riveted together. This construction method made the hull flexible, allowing it to twist and flex with the waves instead of breaking. It's a design that feels both incredibly sturdy and surprisingly light. The clinker-built hull is what lets your ship ride high over the waves, even when it's full of heavy cargo. Instead of being swamped by them, the ship is powered primarily by its single, massive square sail, made of woven wool and reinforced with leather straps. Sailing a ship like this isn't easy. You have to constantly adjust the sail to catch the wind just right. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that to make the sail waterproof and more durable, it was often soaked in a mixture of fish oil and ox tallow. This process not only protected the wool but also gave the ship a distinctive, and not particularly pleasant, smell. You get used to it, though. It's the smell of hard work and profit. Imagine the collective groans and complaints of a modern crew if their ship smelled faintly of rancid fish grease. You just accept it as part of the job. A small price to pay for a successful journey. The Nar doesn't have a lot of frills. There are no fancy cabins or comfortable bunks. You and your crew sleep on the open deck, using your cloaks and furs as blankets. Or you huddle together in the small open space below deck with the cargo. The steering is done with a side rudder, a large oar-like device on the starboard side of the stern. You remember your father teaching you how to use it. The immense force of the water resisting your every move. It takes a lot of strength and skill to keep the ship on course, especially in rough seas. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' mastery of shipbuilding technology was a key factor in their success as merchants, or if their social organization and cultural values were more important. Did the ship enable the trade, or did the desire for trade push them to build better ships? It's another one of those circular questions. But you know the truth firsthand. This Nar, with its wide belly and sturdy build, is the reason you're out here. Without it, you'd be stuck at home, and your village would be a lot poorer. You pat the railing one last time before heading below deck for a much-needed rest. The rhythmic groaning of the ship a gentle song. The sea is a flat, gray sheet today, and the wind has all but died. You're floating, more than sailing, making barely any headway. This is the part of the journey that tests your patience and your faith in the gods. You spend the hours staring at the horizon, trying to find any sign of a coming breeze. But you're not just idly waiting, you're also navigating. You don't have a compass, not the kind with a spinning needle you might think of. Your tools are much simpler, and a lot more personal. The primary tool is your knowledge of the sun and the stars. A mainstream historical fact is that Vikings were master navigators who used the position of the sun during the day and the stars at night to determine their heading. They knew which star constellations to follow and could gauge their latitude based on the height of the sun at midday. You can almost feel the weight of this ancient knowledge, passed down through generations, as you stare at the sky. But what happens on a day like today, when the sky is completely overcast? This is where a quirky or fringe tidbit comes into play. You have a sunstone. It's a crystal, possibly calcite, with a specific optical property that allows it to polarize light. On a cloudy day, by holding this stone up to the sky and rotating it, you can pinpoint the sun's location even when it's hidden behind thick clouds. It's like having a magical pair of sunglasses that lets you see a faint, hidden light source. Historians still argue whether the sunstone, mentioned in the sagas, was a real navigational tool or a mythical artifact. But you know it's real because you just used it to get a rough fix on your position. It's a simple, elegant solution to a massive problem. The downside? You still don't know exactly where you are. Just the general direction. It's not GPS, it's more like a very old school compass with a loose needle. The challenges are immense. You don't have accurate maps of the open ocean. You rely on memory, on stories from previous journeys, and on landmarks you've seen before. The coastline of Norway, the Orkney Islands, the eastern coast of England, these are your signposts. You also pay attention to the natural world around you. The flight patterns of birds, the color of the water, the types of fish you see, all of these are clues that tell you where you are. You can tell if you're close to land by the presence of certain bird species, or if you're in a major shipping lane by the color of the water. This deep connection to the environment is what makes you a master of your craft. Imagine the pressure. Your entire crew, your entire investment, rests on your ability to find your way. One wrong turn could lead you to a deadly reef or to a hostile coast. This isn't just about getting from point A to point B, it's about a constant, almost intuitive dialogue with the world around you. You're not just sailing a boat, you're reading the sea, the sky, and the wind like a book. There's a joke among sailors that you have to be able to smell land before you can see it. On a day like this, you're almost trying to do exactly that, straining your senses for any hint of solid ground. A little joke, but it holds a lot of truth. It's a reminder that a good nose and a lot of luck are just as important as a sunstone. After weeks at sea, the sight of land is a balm to your weary soul. The horizon, once an endless line of gray, is now broken by the gentle curve of a shoreline. As you get closer, a large settlement comes into view. This isn't a small village, it's a bustling town. A hive of activity where ships from all over the known world converge. You're approaching Birka, one of the most important trading centers in the Viking world. A mainstream historical fact is that Birka, located on an island in Lake Mälaren, Sweden, was a major international hub that connected Scandinavia with the rest of Europe. The Byzantine Empire, and the Islamic world from the 8th to the 10th centuries. It was the central marketplace for a vast network of merchants like you. A place to offload your goods and acquire new ones. As your nar glides into the harbor, you see a veritable forest of masts. Long ships and nars from Norway, Denmark, and as far away as the Slavic lands and the Byzantine Empire are all jostling for space. The air is thick with the smells of wood smoke, roasting meat, tanning leather, and the salty tang of the sea. The sounds are a cacophony of languages you barely understand. The hammering of blacksmiths, the lowing of cattle being led to market, and the constant chatter of people haggling. You feel a jolt of energy. A quiet excitement that this is where your hard work will finally pay off. You're a businessman, and Birka is your stock exchange. The first order of business is to secure a spot for your ship and a place to set up a market stall. You greet the local port master, maybe sharing a joke about the long journey, and pay the required fee, which is probably a small piece of silver or a few pounds of grain. You've brought your scales with you, the most important tool a merchant owns, because currency here isn't simple. You'll need to haggle and weigh every piece of silver that comes your way. As you walk through the crowded streets, you see a dazzling array of goods. There are furs from the far north, but also silk from Byzantium and spices from the east. There are Frankish swords and Slavic pottery, Anglo-Saxon silver jewelry and Rhineland glassware. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that you might also see small amulets and charms from distant lands, believed to ward off evil or bring good luck. A merchant from the east might be selling a small, intricately carved bone figurine that promises to protect sailors. You might buy one, just for the laugh, but maybe a little bit for the hope, too. It's a good conversation starter. At the very least, the social dynamics are fascinating. You might share a drink with a merchant from Frisia, an old trading rival, and swap stories of the journey. Or you might listen to a Varangian, a Viking who has served in the Byzantine Guard, tell tales of the emperor's palace and the riches of Constantinople. Historians still argue whether the presence of these trading centers like Birka was the primary reason for the Vikings' cultural and technological exchange with other civilizations, or if it was simply a symptom of a larger, pre-existing interconnected world. Was Birka a cause or an effect? You're here, living the effect, and you can see how much richer your world is because of it. It's all a bit overwhelming, but you're not here to gawk, you're here to work. The game is on, and you're ready to play. As you set up your stall in Birka, you're not alone. You notice your cousin, Astrid, a sharp-witted and formidable woman, is already hard at work a few stalls down. She's haggling fiercely with a merchant from the Rhineland over the price of a beautiful piece of Frankish glasswork. Watching her, you're reminded that your world is not just a man's world. The women in your life, your mother, your wife, your sister, are all integral parts of the economic engine that drives your society. A mainstream historical fact is that Viking women held a remarkable degree of economic and social power compared to their contemporaries in other parts of Europe. They could own land, inherit property, and even divorce their husbands. They were not just passive participants, they were active agents in the economy. Astrid, for example, is not just trading for personal gain. She's representing her family's interests. And she's probably managing a substantial household estate back home. The men might go on long voyages, but it's the women who often manage the day-to-day operations of the farm and the trading enterprise. They oversee the weaving of the wool, the preparation of dried fish, and the rearing of livestock. They are the ones who make sure there's enough food in the larder for winter and that the family's wealth is protected while you're away. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that archaeological finds show that women were often buried with keys to chests and houses, symbolizing their role as the head of the household and the guardian of its wealth. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a reflection of a legal and social reality. You wouldn't think of leaving on a journey without making sure your wife was fully aware of all your business dealings and had the authority to act on your behalf. Your wife, Untold, is not just waiting at home. She's a businesswoman in her own right. She might be a skilled weaver, her intricate patterns on woolen cloth fetching a high price. Or perhaps she's a dairy master, her cheeses and butter highly sought after. Her contributions are not seen as a side job. They're a central part of the family's wealth. You've seen her trade with other women at the local market, making her own deals and establishing her own reputation. This is a system of mutual reliance, where the success of one depends on the success of the other. Historians still argue whether this high status was a unique cultural trait of the Vikings or a practical necessity born from the long periods men spent away from home, leaving women to run everything. Was it a result of their progressive mindset? Or just good, old-fashioned pragmatism? Watching Astrid close her deal with a satisfied smile, you feel a sense of pride. You know that if something were to happen to you on this journey, your family wouldn't be destitute. Astrid and Untold would pick up the reins, manage the estate, and continue to trade and prosper. They are not just your partners in life, they are your partners in business. The silver you earn, the goods you acquire, and the reputation you build are all a joint effort. It's a reminder that the image of the solitary male Viking warrior is just a small part of a much bigger, more complex picture. The real strength of your society lies in this partnership, in the shared responsibility and the hard work of both men and women. It's a joke among your crew that the women are the real bosses back home. And it's not even a little bit a lie. You've been in Burka for a few days now, and the haggling is in full swing. A merchant from the Rhineland is eyeing your walrus ivory, and you're doing your best to look uninterested, though you know he's keen. He wants to pay you in Frankish silver coins. This is where the real work begins, because currency in your world isn't a simple matter of counting coins. A mainstream historical fact is that the most common form of currency in the Viking Age was silver. But it wasn't always in the form of coins. It was often raw silver, or hacksilver, which was bits of jewelry, pieces of ingots, and even cut-up coins. The value of the silver was determined by its weight and purity, not by a face value stamped on it. This is why the small, portable scales you carry on your belt are your most important tool. You pull out your scales, a small, elegant brass set, and the merchant from the Rhineland pulls out his. He hands you a small leather pouch filled with Frankish deniers. You don't just take his word for it. You meticulously weigh each coin, checking for inconsistencies. Then you bite each one, a trick to check if it's solid silver or just a plated fake. It's a game of trust, but with very real consequences if you lose. The merchant watches you, a small, knowing smile on his face. He knows you're just doing your due diligence. After you've weighed his coins, you pull out a small piece of one of your own silver ingots. You'll need to cut off a small piece, some hacksilver, to make up the difference in the price you've agreed upon. You use a small chisel and a hammer, and the tiny ping of the metal as it breaks is a familiar sound. The negotiation is a careful dance. You might want his Frankish coins, not just for the silver, but because they have a certain status or are easier to trade in certain places. Or you might prefer to be paid in goods. You might trade a part of your walrus ivory for a piece of beautiful Frankish glasswork, which you know will fetch a high price back home. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that your transaction might also include an intricate glass bead from Byzantium, a highly valuable and sought-after item that was often used as a form of small change in larger transactions. These beads, often with complex patterns, were symbols of status and wealth. You might toss one in as a final gesture to seal the deal. A little bit of flair to show you're a man of the world. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of hacksilver and the practice of weighing currency fostered a more egalitarian and flexible economy, or if it made transactions more prone to fraud and distrust. Was this a clever, sophisticated system, or a chaotic, disorganized one? You can see both sides. It makes you a sharp negotiator, forcing you to be constantly aware of the value of everything around you. But it also means that you can never fully relax. The work of a merchant is never done. The Rhineland merchant takes the ivory, and you take his pouch of coins. The deal is done. You feel a sense of satisfaction, knowing that you came out on top, and that the long journey was worth it. But your mind is already on the next transaction, with a pouch of fresh silver at your belt. You're ready for the next leg of your journey. You won't be heading back west toward home just yet. There's another, more challenging, and potentially far more profitable route to the east. You've heard the stories from other merchants in Burka. Tales of great rivers and even greater riches. You're embarking on the river highways. The network of waterways that connected Scandinavia to the heart of the Byzantine Empire and the lucrative markets of the Middle East. This is not a coastal cruise, it's a journey into the wild, untamed interior of Eastern Europe. A mainstream historical fact is that the Viking merchants who traveled these routes were known as the Rus, and they played a key role in the formation of the Kievan Rus, the precursor to modern Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. You leave the relative safety of the Baltic Sea and enter the vast rivers of the eastern lands. Your Nar is a bit big for this, so you might have to transfer your goods to smaller, more nimble riverboats, or even drag your Nar over land on rollers from one river system to another. This process, known as a portage, is grueling work. You and your crew have to unload the entire ship, pull it through the mud and over hills, and then re-launch it in a new river. It's a logistical nightmare, and you're constantly exhausted. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that during these portage, the Rus often had to carry their entire ships and cargo on their backs through dense forest and across treacherous terrain to avoid dangerous rapids and waterfalls. Imagine the collective groans, and the amount of backache that comes with hauling a fully loaded wooden boat for miles. The journey is a gauntlet of dangers. You have to navigate the rapids of the Dnieper River, a series of 7 cataracts that were so treacherous they were given names like the Sleeping One and the Ferocious One. The local Slavic tribes are a constant concern. You have to be ready to fight or, more likely, to pay a tribute to them for safe passage. This is where your diplomacy skills come into play. You're not a raider here, you're a traveling businessman. You have to negotiate safe passage, build relationships, and maintain a reputation for honesty and strength. The reward for all this hardship? A meeting with the sophisticated markets of the Byzantine Empire. The ultimate destination is Miklagard, the Norse name for Constantinople. You're not just trading for silver here, you're trading for silk, spices, wine, and other exotic luxuries that are 100 times more valuable than anything you could find in the north. Historians still argue whether the initial purpose of these eastern expeditions was purely for trade, or if the lure of military service in Constantinople for the famed Varangian Guard was an equally strong motivator. Were they merchants first, or mercenaries first? You can feel the tension between these two roles in your own life. You're a merchant, but you're also armed, and you're always ready for a fight. The wind is at your back, and you're no longer a speck on the ocean, you're a small, determined boat on a huge river, heading toward the heart of the known world. The river journey continues, and you've found yourself in a small, bustling settlement on the banks of the Dnieper. The locals, a mix of Slavic and Finnic peoples, eye you with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Your first instinct might be to draw your sword, but you're not here to fight. You're here to trade. This is where the subtle art of diplomacy and cultural exchange becomes just as important as the goods in your hold. A mainstream historical fact is that Viking merchants, especially on these eastern routes, had to be masters of negotiation and cultural assimilation. They didn't just sail in and demand things, they learned local customs, established treaties, and often married into local families to secure their trading rights. You approach the local chieftain, a man with a stern face and a surprisingly gentle demeanor once you get past the initial formalities. You don't speak his language perfectly, but you know enough to get by. You offer a gift, perhaps a beautifully crafted brooch from home, or a small bag of silver. This gesture is not just a bribe, it's a sign of respect and a way to open a dialogue. You spend the evening sharing stories around a fire, drinking their local fermented beverage, and telling them tales of your journey. You learn about their customs, their fears, and their needs. You discover they have plenty of furs but a desperate need for good quality iron tools and weapons. You just happen to have a few of those in your hold. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that Vikings on these routes often adopted local names or created new ones that were easier for their trading partners to pronounce. You might be known as Ragnar at home, but here, you might go by Rorik, a name that sounds more familiar to the local ear. It's a small change, but it's a critical part of blending in and building trust. The interaction is a fascinating blend of different cultures. You see their pottery, their clothing, and their religious symbols. And you can't help but notice the influences from the different peoples they've traded with. You're not just a seller, you're also a source of news and new ideas. You tell them about the magnificent cities of the Byzantine Empire and the strange lands of the West. You might even trade a piece of your precious amber for a beautiful piece of local craftsmanship. A reminder of the connections you've made. Historians still argue whether this process of assimilation was a calculated strategy to dominate trade, or if it was a natural outcome of prolonged cultural contact. Did they intentionally become part of these new societies to get ahead? Or did it just happen over time? The night ends with a successful trade agreement. You've secured your passage, sold some of your goods, and acquired new ones. You feel a sense of accomplishment, not just for the profit, but for the connection you forged. You are a bridge between two worlds, a small but vital link in a vast chain of trade and cultural exchange. You've proven that the axe is not always the best tool for the job. Sometimes, a well-timed joke and a shared meal are far more effective than any weapon. The chieftain claps you on the back, a sign of mutual respect, and you know you'll be welcomed here again on your next journey. The journey continues, and you find yourself in the bustling marketplace of a settlement far to the east. You've traded away much of your heavy cargo, the wool, the tools, the salted fish. Now you're in the market for something different, something that carries its value not in its weight, but in its beauty and the artistry of its creation. You're here for beads. This might sound strange to a modern mind, but a mainstream historical fact is that glass beads were a major form of currency and a crucial luxury good in the Viking world. They were often traded for furs, slaves, and other high-value commodities, and their demand stretched from Scandinavia to the Far East. These aren't just simple beads, they're intricate works of art, each with its own story. You approach the stall of a merchant from Byzantium, a man with a flowing robe and a sharp eye. On a small leather cloth, he has an array of glass beads, shimmering in the sunlight. There are monochrome beads of deep blue and amber, but the real treasures are the mosaic beads, with complex geometric patterns and swirls of different colors. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some of the most sought-after beads were made in places like Venice and the Middle East, with techniques so advanced that the Vikings couldn't replicate them. This meant that the beads you're looking at are not just pretty trinkets. They're a physical representation of the wealth and technological prowess of distant empires. To own one is to own a piece of a far-off, magical world. You might haggle for a large, blue bead with a white spiral pattern, a powerful symbol of status, or perhaps a smaller, multicolored mosaic bead, a piece of art in miniature. The price is not in silver coins, but in furs, or perhaps in a promise of future trade. The merchant watches you carefully, knowing the value of what he has. He tells you a story of how the bead was made, of the immense heat required to create the intricate patterns, of the master craftsmen who labored over it. It's a way of elevating the value of the item, making it more than just glass. The social significance of these beads is immense. Back home, a woman wearing a string of these beads on her brooch is not just showing off. She's displaying the wealth and success of her family. It's a statement of status that's understood by everyone. Historians still argue whether the demand for these luxury goods, and especially these beads, was a primary driver for the expansion of Viking trade routes. Did the desire for these beautiful objects push them to travel further and further? Or did the availability of these goods simply fill a pre-existing market? You're not sure of the answer, but you know that the desire to bring back something beautiful and exotic for your loved ones back home is a powerful motivator. You make your purchase, and the weight of the small, precious bag of beads feels heavier than any sack of grain. It's a different kind of wealth, a different kind of success. You've not just acquired a valuable good, you've acquired a piece of a story, a connection to a world far removed from your own. As you walk away from the stall, you feel a renewed sense of purpose. You're a merchant of stories and beauty, not just of raw materials. The beads you just purchased are a small piece of a much larger economic puzzle. They, and many of the other luxuries you've seen, are ultimately paid for by one thing: silver. Your Eastern journey, with all its dangers and hardships, is a direct response to a massive influx of silver from the Islamic world. A mainstream historical fact is that the Viking economy, particularly in the East, was profoundly impacted by a surge of Arab silver, known as dirhams. These coins flowed from the great cities of the Islamic Caliphate, like Baghdad and Samarkand, through the trading centers of Central Asia and Russia, and into your hands. This wasn't a trickle, it was a torrent of silver that transformed the economy of the entire Viking world. You've heard the stories of these places, of cities far larger and more magnificent than anything you could imagine. The merchants you meet on the eastern rivers are often carrying bags of these silver coins. And you can see the intricate Arabic script on them. They are not just money, they are a tangible link to a sophisticated and distant civilization. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that many of the dirhams found in Viking hoards were deliberately defaced by scratching or marking them, possibly to kill the coin and render it inert for its intended purpose. This might have been a way to ritually neutralize the foreign symbols on the coins. Or maybe it was just a simple way to test their purity. It's a strange but common practice that tells a story of how different cultures interacted and even clashed on a symbolic level. The sheer volume of this silver created a new kind of wealth in your society. It allowed for the accumulation of riches in a way that was previously impossible. It fueled the growth of trading centers like Burka, and it provided the capital for even more ambitious trading voyages. The desire for this silver was a powerful motivator, pushing you and your fellow merchants further and further into uncharted territory. You could trade a few pieces of hacksilver for a beautiful Frankish sword, which you could then trade for furs, which you could then trade for more of this Arab silver. It's a cyclical process, and you're a crucial cog in the machine. Historians still argue whether this influx of silver was the primary cause of the Viking expansion and economic growth, or if it was simply a valuable commodity that they exploited. Did the silver create the Viking Age of Trade, or did the Viking Age of Trade simply find a valuable resource to capitalize on? You can feel the impact firsthand. This silver, in all its forms, coins, hacksilver, jewelry, is the lifeblood of your economic system. It's what allows you to buy the beads, the silks, and the other luxuries you crave. It's what allows you to live a life far more comfortable than that of your ancestors. The weight of the silver in your pouch is a constant reminder of the long, dangerous journey you have undertaken, and the immense power of a coin from a distant land. You've made it to the coast. Your river journey complete. Now, you're sailing through the waters of the Baltic, heading west, your hold filled with fine cloth, exotic spices, and bags of silver dirhams. But even with the promise of a successful return, you can't let your guard down. The world of a Viking merchant is never completely safe. The threat of violence, both from nature and from other people, is a constant shadow. A mainstream historical fact is that while trade was a central part of Viking life, piracy and raiding were never far from the picture. The same ships and skills used for commerce could easily be turned to plunder. And the line between merchant and raider could be a very thin one. You and your crew are armed, of course. Each man has his axe or sword, and a round shield. This is not for show, it's a necessity. You have to be ready to defend your ship and your cargo at a moment's notice. The threat of rival Viking crews is always present. They might see your gnar, heavy with goods, and decide to try their luck. You've heard stories of entire convoys being ambushed in narrow straits. The battle for a successful haul turning into a bloodbath. It's a harsh world, and you know that if you show any sign of weakness, you'll be an easy target. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that merchants often had to hire armed bodyguards, sometimes even from among their trade rivals, to ensure safe passage through particularly dangerous areas. It's a strange paradox. You hire the very people you fear to protect you from the very people they are. The dangers aren't just from other people. The sea itself is a bandit, ready to snatch away your life and your livelihood at any moment. A sudden storm, a hidden reef, a rogue wave. These are all threats you live with every day. Your ship is sturdy, and your crew is experienced, but the ocean is a force of nature that can't be reasoned with. And then there are the dangers on land. As you travel through the territories of different tribes and kingdoms, you have to be wary of bandits, rival traders, and local rulers who might demand an exorbitant toll for passage. You have to be a good judge of character, knowing when to stand your ground and when to pay the tribute. Historians still argue whether the high level of violence and risk in Viking trade was a reflection of a lawless age, or if it was simply a byproduct of a highly competitive and decentralized economic system with little formal legal oversight. Was this just how business was done? A high-stakes game where violence was an accepted part of the deal? You can feel the tension in the air. The long nights on the open sea are not just a time for sleep, they are a time for taking turns on watch. For keeping an eye out for a telltale sail on the horizon. The success of your journey rests on your ability to navigate not just the waves, but the treacherous human landscape as well. You've successfully navigated the treacherous rivers and the dangerous seas. And now you're on the final leg of your journey. But you're not heading home. You're heading south, far south, to the great city of Miklagard, the Norse name for Constantinople, the city of the emperors, a place of immense wealth and power. This isn't a trade mission in the traditional sense. This is about selling a very different kind of commodity, yourselves. A mainstream historical fact is that many Vikings, particularly those who traveled the eastern routes, ended up serving in the Varangian Guard, an elite unit of the Byzantine emperor's personal bodyguards. They were the ultimate luxury export, a service for a price. The Varangian Guard was a legendary force, known for their fierce loyalty and fighting prowess. The emperor, wary of his own domestic troops, often preferred to rely on these foreign warriors, whom he could trust implicitly. The pay was excellent, the opportunities for loot were immense, and the prestige was undeniable. You see some of them on the streets of Constantinople. Men with familiar features but dressed in the ornate, armor-plated robes of the Byzantine military. They carry massive, two-handed axes, a symbol of their northern heritage, but they move with a discipline and grace that is entirely foreign. It's a striking image, a blend of two very different worlds. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that members of the Varangian Guard, despite their foreign origin, were considered to be part of the emperor's family, and were granted certain privileges, like the right to visit the city's baths and markets freely. They were not just mercenaries, they were a trusted and privileged class of foreigners. You've heard stories from returning Varangians of the immense riches they brought back, not just from their pay, but from the loot they acquired during military campaigns and from the politsa, the emperor's gifting of clothing and other valuable items after a successful war. This kind of wealth far surpasses anything a simple merchant like you could hope to acquire. The decision to join the Guard is a weighty one. It means leaving your old life behind, swearing an oath to a foreign ruler, and committing yourself to a life of professional warfare. It's a life of immense risk, but also immense reward. Historians still argue whether the initial purpose of these eastern journeys was for trade or for mercenary work. Did they travel east for the goods? Or was the ultimate goal to get to Constantinople and join the Guard? It's another one of those circular questions. But you know that the prospect of joining the Varangian Guard, of becoming a part of this living legend, is a powerful lure. The men you're with, your crew, are a mix of traders and potential soldiers. The line between the two is blurry. And in a place like Constantinople, it almost seems to disappear entirely. You've had a successful run. You've sold your northern goods, acquired new luxuries, and perhaps even left a few of your crew behind in Constantinople to join the Varangian Guard. Now, you're on the final leg of the journey home. But the world you're returning to is subtly different from the one you left. The Viking Age is not an endless, unchanging era. The winds of change are beginning to blow, and you can feel them. A mainstream historical fact is that the traditional Viking merchant lifestyle began to decline in the late 11th century due to a number of interconnected factors, including the increasing consolidation of power by European monarchies, the rise of powerful Christian kingdoms, and the establishment of more stable, formalized trade networks. The wild, free-for-all days of a lone merchant sailing from place to place are slowly but surely coming to an end. The old ways are changing. The kings of Norway, Denmark, and Sweden are no longer just chieftains of a small, localized region. They are consolidating their power, collecting taxes, and establishing royal control over the very trading centers that made your life possible. The new Christian kingdoms, especially in places like England and France, are no longer just hostile foreigners. They are becoming powerful states with their own navies and their own trade laws. The old Viking model of combining a bit of raiding with a lot of trading is no longer tenable. You can't just sail into a harbor, pay a toll, and set up shop. You have to deal with a growing bureaucracy, with royal charters, and with the long arm of the law. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that the introduction of a more structured, Formalized legal system in these Christian kingdoms made it harder for Viking merchants to operate in the gray areas of trade and piracy, forcing them to become more legitimate businessmen or be branded as outlaws. The river highways you once traveled with a mix of fear and excitement are now becoming more civilized. The Kievan Rus, founded in part by your ancestors, is a powerful kingdom in its own right, and it has its own laws and its own trade treaties. You can no longer just pay a tribute to a local chieftain. You have to deal with the Grand Prince himself, who demands a share of the profits. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It does make the routes safer, but it also cuts into your profit margin and takes away some of your autonomy. Historians still argue whether the decline of the Viking Age was a result of external pressures from more powerful states, or if it was an internal transformation as Viking society itself became more complex and settled. Was it an end caused by others, or a natural evolution from within? You're a man of the old world, a product of a time when courage and a sharp mind were all you needed. But your children, you suspect, will live in a very different world, one of more stability, but also one of less freedom. The winds of change are blowing, and you can feel them at your back as you sail home. The thrill of the unknown is being replaced by the steady, predictable hum of a more organized society. You've made a good living, and you'll pass on a great deal of wealth to your family. But you know you're one of the last of your kind. You've made it. The sight of your home fjord is a welcome one. The familiar shapes of the mountains and the scattered homesteads of balm for your travel-weary eyes. You're home, but the journey isn't over yet. The real work now is in the telling of the stories, in the sharing of the wealth, and in the passing on of the knowledge you've acquired. A mainstream historical fact is that the wealth and goods brought back by merchants like you had a profound and lasting impact on the social fabric of Viking society, leading to the rise of powerful, wealthy families and shaping the cultural landscape for generations to come. Your success isn't just your own, it's a success for your entire family and your community. You offload your goods and your silver, and your family gathers around to hear your tales. You tell them about the magnificent city of Constantinople, about the strange and intricate glass beads from the east, and about the sheer effort it took to haul the ship over land to another river. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that your reputation as a successful merchant is what allows you to make a good marriage for your children, or to secure a better position for yourself in the community. You're not just a man who went away and came back. You're a man who has seen the world and brought a piece of it home. Your legacy isn't just in the silver you've accumulated. It's in the stories you tell and the connections you've made. The stories you tell around the fire at night are not just for entertainment, they are a form of education. A way of passing on the knowledge of the world to the next generation of merchants. Historians still argue whether the lasting legacy of the Viking Age was its violence and conquest, or its incredible achievements in trade and exploration. Were they remembered for their raids, or for their role in connecting disparate parts of the world and laying the groundwork for a more globalized economy? You know the answer in your bones. The raids were a small, fleeting part of the story. The real legacy is the gnar, the hacksilver, the beads, and the relationships you forged. The world you live in is a direct result of these journeys. The trade routes you pioneered are now the foundation of later medieval European economies. The connections you made between cultures still echo in the language and customs of the lands you traveled. Your journey has come to an end, at least for now. The long nights on the sea, the dangers, and the excitement are all behind you. You're sitting by the fire, a cup of mead in your hand, listening to the crackling of the flames. The world outside is a little quieter now, a little less wild, but the world you've helped to create is a lot richer, a lot more connected, and a lot more interesting because of men like you. You close your eyes, the warmth of the fire on your face, and the rhythmic sound of your heartbeat a gentle reminder of the long, strange journey that has come to an end. The fire is dying down now. Just a few embers glowing like sleepy eyes in the dark. Your own eyes are getting heavy. The day's work and the long journey finally catching up with you. The stories are all told. The memories are tucked away. And the weight of the world you've carried on your shoulders for so long is finally starting to lift. Just rest now. The gnar is safely moored. The cargo is secure. And your family is all sleeping peacefully under the same roof. The silver in your pouch is just a cold, heavy thing now. A reminder of the journey. But not the journey itself. The real treasure is the knowledge that you made it home. That you're safe and sound. And that tomorrow is a new day with no sea to cross. No rapids to navigate, and no merchants to haggle with. Just the quiet calm of home. Let your mind drift away from the creaking of the ship and the crash of the waves. Just the gentle sound of the wind through the eaves of the house and the soft hum of the world going to sleep around you. It's time to rest now. Close your eyes.